Monster Hunter has easily become one of my all-time favorite video game series, thanks to some fun combat, neat weapons and armor, some interesting lore and locations, and last but not least, some awesome monsters to hunt. Now much like Pokemon, Monster Hunter goes through generations, each one introducing some new monsters and altering some old ones. What I want to do is to take a look at each of the generations and talk about my favorite monsters from each of them. So naturally, we'll be starting with the first generation, the one that introduced me to the series. Of all the generations, this one seems to get the most hate in terms of its roster, at least from what I've seen. I will admit this has been, so far, my least favorite generation, but I still think there's some merit here. Why don't we take a look at 10 of my favorite monsters from the first generation? Keep in mind that this list is my opinion, and I'm sure I'm gonna upset a lot of people with the monsters on this list and where. So, despite how much hate I might get, let's get this started. To start things off, we have a pretty early monster, the Yian Kut-Ku. Oh yeah, I might be pronouncing these monsters a bit differently from what you're used to, or I might just be completely mispronouncing them on accident, so I apologize ahead of time. Since I first got into the series with the original Monster Hunter, the Yian Kut-Ku ended up being the first wyvern I ever hunted, and early on, it's a decent enough challenge. The Kut-Ku has a charging attack, will shoot fireballs at ya, and will peck at ya. The fire and the pecking are pretty well telegraphed and are usually easy to dodge, with the charge attack being the hardest since it has such a small window of opportunity. Kut-Ku is a bit scrawny and has some kinda weird ears, at least to me, but I find it to be a charming design. I'm not huge on its armor set, and not many of its weapons interest me, aside from the insect glaive, which has a neat serpent tongue-like blade. It's not an amazing monster, but I think it's a decent enough hunt early on. Up next, we have Cephadrome. Yes, I understand a lot of people tend to not like this monster, and I can see why. It tends to stay under the sand, making it hard to hit, and has a paralysis bite, which, yeah, paralysis kinda sucks. But most of its attacks don't do too much damage, are easy to dodge, and trust me, the original Cephadrome battle had the monster under the sand 90% of the time, and it sucked ass. Modern Cephadrome is a much better hunt, and the idea of a sandshark wyvern is really cool, even if the execution isn't the best. While I don't care much for its weapons, I do like the Cephadrome armor, which has some okay skills in 4U, but the simple look of the armor appeals to me. I like the scales, and I like the fins. Okay, so here, I'm probably gonna piss some people off, but at number 8, we have the Fatalis. The Fatalis is one of the most feared elder dragons in the series, who's shrouded in mystery and can even scare monsters larger than it. Not to mention, it has a great color scheme that's mostly black, with a long tail and neck, a fearsome face, and has a pair of great wings. The tongue might be a bit goofy though. I've only hunted Fatalis once and died, but I've taken on the Crimson Fatalis a few times. Because of this, I like Crimson more, plus it's still a very challenging fight since the monster hits pretty hard and uses flamethrower attacks, will summon meteors, bite at you, and swing its tail. Not to mention, the Crimson's hellish-like design is so killer, and both monsters have a great theme. I've never gone for its equipment, but I've seen the armor sets and I think they look cool. I just don't feel like going for them. The reason the Fatalis is so low on my list is because of how little I've hunted it. I don't think I have enough knowledge on its battles as I do for the rest of the monsters on this list. Though, as far as I'm concerned, Fatalis will always be the granddad of Elder Dragons for me. So, in the first generation, there are a few monsters who feel like clones of each other. What I mean is, some of the monsters look very similar and have similar attacks. An example of this would be Mombolus and the Diablos. And of these two, I kinda like Diablos more. Its thick, intimidating horns, sharp fangs for eating cactus, and that powerful club-like tail. Much like the name implies, the Diablos is very devilish, as in, it's a super aggressive monster. The Diablos is a reasonably fast monster who can hit hard, making the fight pretty intense. Though at the same time, I find the hunt to be kinda tedious, as I spend more time dodging the monster's attacks rather than actually fighting it. Diablos is most known for charging at hunters, swinging its tail around, and jumping out from under the ground. Oh yeah, and that roar. While underground, you can trap the monster with a well-timed sonic bomb, giving you a huge advantage over the Diablos. I don't really care much for the weapons and armor though. Speaking of clone monsters, let's talk about Gravios. Yeah, I like the Gravios more than Basarios. First off, the Gravios looks way more intimidating, at least to me. It's all spiky and armored, has a menacing face and a club-like tail. The Gravios is quite the flaming fight, as it has a killer flare beam. He'll also charge at you, try to hit you with his hip check, try to fall on you, and swing its tail around. But all of these moves are quite slow, making them easy to dodge. The times when it releases its fire-like gas can get a bit annoying when you misjudge the time to go in for the kill. But the one thing I really get annoyed by with this monster is the fact that when you first take it on in 4U, your weapons can't penetrate its legs, the main part of its body that you can even attack. So your hits keep bouncing off of him until you can finally break those legs. I don't care much for Gravios armor. Sure, it has really good defense in 4U, but Gravios has a cool looking sword and shield that has high power at the cost of low sharpness. Okay, so I know it's weird to have such a basic monster on a top 10 list, let alone this high, but my reasoning is a very personal one. Like I had mentioned before, the first Monster Hunter game I had played was the original Monster Hunter. So, because of that, the first monster I ever hunted was the Velocidrome. I'll be honest, I really love Velociprés. I like the raptor-like bodies, blue scales, and bird-like beaks. Now, the Velocidrome is a very simple monster. It will jump at you, try to bite you, or hip check ya, and that's about it. It's super easy to dodge its attacks, and if you ever get hit, they don't do too much damage. Plus, Velocidrome can be killed quite quickly. I will say real quick, when it comes to the other two drome species I've hunted, I think Gendrome has a cooler looking crest on its head, and Eodrome can go die in a hole. Velocidrome armor is a set I actually really like, especially in 4U, and I enjoy using the sword and shields and insect glaives made from this monster. Velocipré and Velocidrome will always be iconic monsters, at least to me. Now, before you all start sending me tons of hate, just try to hear me out first. Yes, the Plesioth hunt in 3U is not very good, but not because it's hard. Instead, I find it to be really tedious. When the Plesioth is underwater, it moves around quickly, so in order to keep up, you're going to be constantly sheathing and unsheathing your weapon. On land, the hunt isn't as bad, just pick a leg and attack. In Generations though, fighting this monster is much better. The only time the Plesioth is underwater now is in certain locations, and you can't really hit it, plus it can only do one attack that's super easy to dodge. Then, once it's on land, you just need to position yourself properly behind one of its legs and avoid the sleep bite, water sprays, and slide attack. To be fair to those of you who hate this monster, yes, that hip check is still some bullshit, and I hate it just as much as you. However, I just love the look of this monster. It has cool scales, a freaky head, and some great fins. Plesioth is a fish wyvern. I love it. Plus, you can make some nice weapons from this monster. The armor looks weird, but it can be useful in some games. Listen, I'm not saying it's the most amazing monster, but I like the Plesioth equipment more than Diablos and Gravios. I've hunted it more than Fatalis, and it puts up a better challenge than Velocidrome, Kut-Ku, and Cephadrome, which is why it's this high on my list. I get why some people aren't a fan of the Kirin, but I really like it. To start off with, I knew of the Kirin back when I played the original game, though I never had the chance to hunt it since it was only online and the online servers were down at the time. So I was super excited when I finally got to take this mythical unicorn on in 4U. The Kirin is such a unique elder dragon. It's small, has no classical dragon traits, and is one of the few that feel more elegant than fearsome. I would like to think that most people can agree with me that the design of the Kirin is appealing, with that light bluish-white fur, a blue horn, and an amazing mane. Since the Kirin is small, it ends up being faster than some of the larger elder dragons, and uses a lot of lightning attacks that actually aren't too hard to dodge. The most annoying aspect of the Kirin is when it's enraged. When in this state, your weapons will constantly be bouncing off the monster's body unless you A. hit its head, or B. have the right armor on. That's annoying, and will sometimes leave you open to being hit. Armor-wise, the set looks okay, but typically comes with some good skills, and the weapons have some nice thunder damage, my favorite being the Insect Glaive. I really only grinded the Kirin because it's now available in low rank in generations, otherwise I don't tend to grind Elder Dragons. All in all, the Kirin is a cool, interesting, and great mythical Elder Dragon that I personally really enjoy. Now here's where we get to the truly great monsters. At number 2, we have the mascot of the series himself, Rathalos. Being the king of the skies, the Rathalos tends to spend a fair amount of its time in the air. You can bring it down with a flash bomb or pole vault at it, though his attacks when in the air aren't too difficult to avoid, with the exception of the Talon Dive, that can get me from time to time. I remember when I first faced the Rathalos in 4U and was pretty intimidated that the hunt was going to be very hard. Yes, the Rathalos puts up a great challenge. He'll shoot fireballs at you, poison you with his talons, charge towards you, and overall can hit with some massive damage. At the same time, it's so much fun, since the Rathalos is a well-balanced battle. I'm no longer worried to take on Rathalos. Instead, I look forward to it, since he's challenging but fair. Never stay in front of him though, because when he goes in the air, he'll shoot a fireball straight down at the same time, and this move can really fuck you up. Rathalos' armor not only looks great, it also usually has good skills. And those weapons, those weapons, man, they have such badass designs, with the Jin and the Charge Blade being a couple of my favorites. Oh yeah, and the Rathalos looks killer with that pattern on his wings, his spiky tail and scaly body, and has an intimidating red color scheme. Rathalos, you will always be one of the best to me. So we talked about the king, now let's give the queen some attention. Yeah, I like Rathian more than Rathalos. While the Rathalos spends more time in the air, the Rathian is a more grounded hunt. She will charge at ya, try to bite you, shoot fireballs, cause a huge flame explosion, and then, of course, we have her most signature move, her backflip tail swipe, which can also poison you and do a lot of damage. Ah man, I love hunting her so much. She's a mid-tier monster, making her not too hard, but still puts up a good fight, which keeps the battle fun. Rathian is like the best monster to use as a warm-up hunt if you haven't played in a while. This is very personal, but I prefer Rathian's design more than Rathalos. I like her green scales, her spiky wing, head, and tail, the spotted patterns on her wings, and the little bits of fur on her back. Her armor usually comes with some good skills and has an alright design. Rathian weapons, on the other hand, I enjoy them, with some of my favorites being the Charge Blade, Dual Blades, Hunting Horn, and Sword and Shield. Rathian is not only my favorite Generation 1 monster, but it's one of my personal favorites in the series. Well, I hope you enjoyed this list, even if you probably didn't agree with it. Share your favorite monsters from the first generation in the comments section down below. Up next, I will be talking about the second generation, which will hopefully be a more agreeable list for people. Until then, I'll see you all later.